Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Crowe. I'm one of the founders of Ponga, and I'll be your host and moderator today. I'm joined by Barbara Tien, Ponga co-founder, and we want to thank you all for coming and welcome to the Meet Ponga webinar series, Photo Organizing with Kathy Stone. We're excited to kick off the new year with this third in a series of Meet Ponga webinars. But before we get started, I'd like to do a little housekeeping. The session will be recorded and will be available to you after the event is over. All attendees will be on mute, but communication controls are located at the bottom panel of your screen. I'm sure most of you are roughly familiar with Zoom. You can put your questions into the Q&A and we'll get to as many of them as we can during the session. And we will also add content and resource tips for you in the chat window. You can also use the chat window to respond with emojis or comments or questions or things like that. But if you can, keep your questions in the Q&A so we can get them all aggregated. Before I introduce the speaker today, I know many of you are new to Ponga, so first I'd like to do a little bit of a background. We need to better understand family history now more than ever. Between the pandemic, losing loved ones, the increasing distance between families and generations, and the demands of everyday life, we need to refocus on rediscovering, sharing those histories that define who we are and where we come from. It becomes very important to us, especially as we exit the holiday season with a trove of photos and memories that we want to preserve and cherish. Ponga is a digital storytelling service that was born out of the realization that we're perhaps a generation or two from losing awareness and appreciation for the stories and legacies that shaped us, our values, and who we are as individuals. The service is made up of several elements to support that goal. There's three domains of functions. First, to quickly and easily arrange and organize your photos using our very unique facial organization technology. Second, to curate and tell the stories within those photos, either in written or verbal form, and adding any number of resources to the photos like maps, locations, multimedia, video, sound, etc. And third, perhaps most importantly, is to put those photos back into circulation to enrich the lives of our family and friends and allow them to share and collaborate. They can enjoy the content and you can crowdsource stories from others in a completely secure and private way. We also offer support for your efforts, onboarding services like one-on-ones and group events, user support if you get stuck or have a question, FAQs and blogs to answer common questions. We also have a very involved community of subject matter experts like you're going to hear from today, webinars and content, how-tos, success stories, blogs, unique use cases, master classes, and jumpstart programs. We developed Ponga to capture those important moments and stories. We wanted to take the worry out of organizing photos and storytelling and make it fun, quick, and easy. Simply, we help you bring your photos to life through the stories that are locked within them. Okay, that ends the commercial. We're not going to subject you to a demo of Ponga today, but please go to ponga.com/learn-more for a video demo of how it works and how it can simplify your storytelling and photo organization efforts. In addition, if you go on the site, you can sign up for a one-on-one session and watch for emails for a future demo. If you're interested in a demo, please make an entry in the chat session or the chat window down below, and we'll aggregate everybody up and maybe hold just a large demo for everyone. Okay, let's get started with an introduction. Kathy Stone is the founder and owner of CalgaryPhotoSolutions.ca for Canada. She's located in Calgary, and her mission has been to help people preserve their photos and stories by providing a range of organizing services. She's a certified professional photo organizer and a member of the Photo Managers, formerly APPO, the Association of Professional Photo Managers. And for over 20 years, she's worked with family collections, many of them spanning centuries of time and thousands of photos. Prior to her organizing career, she was an accomplished instructor and training developer as principal consultant of Stone Learning Associates and designed and delivered training for the Canadian government and colleges. She's also a certified adult educator and has presented at 5 of the Photo Managers annual conferences and provided training on photo organizing, recovering damaged photos, traditional and album development, and spoken to individuals and organizations about the importance of photo preservation. Her focus now is to help individuals tell their family histories and stories through their photos. She's devoting time now to recording her own family history and stories. She believes that facilitating inertia into action in your photo organizing efforts will create critical momentum so you can get to the good part, which is telling the stories. We're fortunate to have her here today and to share her experiences, best practices, tips and tricks, and accelerate your organization and storytelling efforts. By the end of the session today, you'll gain actionable insights for photo organization, techniques from a pro about how to tackle any project, large and small, better understand how a pro organizes their collection, how to think about workflow to reduce that overwhelming feeling, and digitizing choices, different techniques for turning your analog photos into digital records, tips for managing computer file images and hard copy vintages, documents and treasures, and learn how to protect and recover damaged photos after a disaster. As a special offer, all attendees who are going to attend today will receive a free 30-minute one-on-one consultation with Kathy to review your own plan and challenges and to get her advice on the best way to tackle your projects. In addition, Barbara will describe a special Ponga bundle at the conclusion of today's session, so stay until the end. Kathy, welcome.
Thanks, Cameron. I'm really happy to be here as part of the family history series. If for anyone who I'm the third, I think, in the series. We learned all about storytelling with Rhonda Lauritsen and discovering the details in your photos, and also talking about social history with Lisa Leeson. Both of those are fascinating topics and a couple of my favorite things that I could talk about a lot because I love both of them, and they're really becoming more and more important to me, both those aspects of our family history and our photos. So Kathy, I get to talk about. Sorry.
I was just going to say, maybe one of the ways as we think about this third session, let's kick off a little bit about your personal story. Kathy's agreed to kind of take off the veil a little bit and tell us a little bit about her recent victory over cancer and how that motivated her to do now personally what she's been doing for clients for so many years, kind of a cobbler's children type of a story. Yeah. And how you got to the point now where you're moving back from your professional work and now doing this primarily as consultant, as you're doing today, and primarily aggregating your own family stories.
Yeah, and that's sometimes we need a motivation or a really big kick in the pants, not just a little motivation. One of the questions I was going to ask everyone is how many people who are here made a resolution because they want to get their photo. You're going to organize your photos this year. And you can put it in the chat or you can put your hand up or something. How many made the same resolution last year or have had the same resolution for the last 10 years? It's been on my radar. It's been something I've wanted to do. It's been on my to-do list, is to organize my own photos for years. But as Cameron mentioned, on the heels of COVID and the pandemic, I got a diagnosis of breast cancer last January, I guess it'd be about a year ago. And that kind of gives you, that's a big wake up call. And I thought, it's really, really important to get these stories told because my entire generation above me is gone. My parents, aunts, uncles, all of those, there's nobody left to tell the stories. And we've lost some of my cousins already. So it's up to us to tell these stories, and we need to get on it because things happen. And so without such a dramatic reason to start, for many of you, you've had that resolution, life gets in the way. First of all, organizing photos is overwhelming. We'll admit that straight up. It's an overwhelming process. It's hard to know where to start. Life gets in the way. This last year, 2022, we spent a lot of time trying to get back to normal, I guess. Our kids went back to school, sports started again. Stuff gets in the way all the time. That new Netflix show is on tonight, so maybe I'll do that photos tomorrow. But what I want to do is show you some ways that you can get to, as Cameron mentioned, the good part. There's a song by AJR called The Good Part, and there's a line in it that's spoken, that's repeated, that says, can we skip to the good part? And that struck me that this is what we need to do with our photos, is skip to the good part, which for me is telling the stories and finding all those little clues in photos and sharing them in Ponga. So that's what I want to do here today. And hopefully I'm not going to cough too much either. So what I want to show you is what I've learned from being a professional photo organizer We follow a set workflow process. Pretty much every photo organizer will follow very similar processes, and it's very organized and very step by step, but it can either really take a long time to get it done, or parts of it we've just have to admit are not really that exciting. They're not really the good part yet, but there's a few things we need to do to get to the good part. If you're tuning in to know how to be a professional photo organizer, that's not what we're going to talk about today, but rather how to help you as an individual use this approach, but make your own decisions on what you need to do. And kind of tell you some of the shortcuts I've decided to take with my own photos, because I figure that's how it's going to get done.
Kathy, one of the things that I think everybody has a challenge with when they finally get to the point where you've had whatever, in your case, a pretty cathartic circumstance, right? That decided, hey, I better get this going, because it's an incredibly pointed reminder of our own mortalities. And if we wait too long, we're not going to have anything to share with all those generations downstream. How in the heck do you get started? I mean, everybody I'm watching the chat room, everybody has hundreds, in some cases, thousands of photographs. Yeah. Where do you even begin?
Well, one of the first steps that the photo organizer uses, and that I've used myself, is to gather everything together as much as you can. Now, for pros, we want to have everything before we even start working on your project. We want all of your photos, your negatives, everything. You don't really need to do that for your own stuff, for your own things. Like what have you got? I'm pretty ssure most of you, I got a whole pile of boxes underneath my work table here that are all my personal photos. So gather up somewhere to start. You just need to start. So pick, if there's a box of photos and you go, well, those were Grammy's old pictures, I'm going to start there. Or I'm going to start with Mom's, or I'm going to start with Uncle George's stuff. Just pick a spot and just start there. Because the part about doing it yourself is you can always come back and add more things, which is what I also like about Ponga, is I can put a few things in and then do all the fun part, which is the storytelling and the linking to other things. And then I can come back and put some more stuff in. I'm not, as an individual now, I'm not going to operate on a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. There's a few things you do have to do. With your part of gathering too, or the next step is to set a goal or a plan. And I don't mean like we talk about you have to have a SMART goal, realistic goals. Is what do you want to do? What do you want the outcome to be? Like, just as a guidance for you to follow through. List the steps that you're going to take to help keep you on track, because it's easy to get off a track too.
Can you talk, Kathy, about what kind of steps those are, and kind of walk people through the kind of things they should be thinking about as they develop that?
Absolutely. What we're going to start with is, I would say, make your plan and schedule a time to work on your photos. And even if it's 30 minutes a day, a week, a month, whatever you can manage, like it's got to fit in, but schedule a time. Don't keep it as something, oh, I'll do that when I have enough time, because it always gets, and some nights it might not work out, but sometimes it will work.
So essentially, don't think of it as a gigantic project. Think of it as incremental efforts, so it doesn't become kind of voluminous and overwhelming and cause you to just sit there and look at it with a glaze in your eyes.
Yeah. Like say, today I'm going to organize, and I'll talk a little bit about categories to sort when you have the big mess to start. But today I'm going to do box number 1, and I'm going to work on it. My other tip is keep track of what you've got sorted, what you've already had digitized, and what you've uploaded to Ponga, so you know where you're at. I do that with all my clients very carefully. I keep spreadsheets and everything. Not so good at doing it myself. So that's something that I've learned that probably is not a bad idea to do for me, is to keep track of where I'm at, so I remember. The big question about, because there's one thing you have to do of everything we're going to talk about today. One thing you have to do to get your stuff into Ponga, you have to have it digitized. And so you can digitize stuff before or after you sort it. I like to sort it first because I prefer not to stare at my computer for hours on end after stuff is digitized. If you sort it first, you can kind of, because I've been going through some more recent photos, and it came in the era of pre-digital photos, but hey, we'll develop your photos, and would you like an extra 2 or 3 sets for 25 cents each? And so I now have like 6 or 7 copies of every photo that I don't need. So that's one of the advantages of going through stuff. Get rid of the stuff that you don't need. We talk about deleting blurry photos, get rid of duplicates, delete. One of the things is to get rid of photos that are just of scenery. My takeaway with that is be careful with that, because sometimes that's where all those little details are that will help you tell the story. I use the example here. I'm sure there's similar ones for the States, but anyone here in Western Canada, at least, has been to Bouchard Gardens on Vancouver Island. And so any photo collection you look at is going to be full of pictures of snapshots taken with your Kodak Instamatic of flowers that now don't really look like much. So those ones I always say, like, look for the ones with the people in them to try and trim down your collection. And then figure out what a lot of how you're organizing goes depends on how much stuff you're working with. Like I sorted a collection that filled a room and a walk-in closet in a house. That needed to be done in layers. You couldn't just go thing by thing because nothing was organized at all. So we started off with large categories based on what the clients did in their life. They did charitable work. They had they were involved in golf every year. They had their businesses. So we sort of split it into, they were very involved in the Calgary Stampede. So we sort of used broad categories so that we could just deal with, because everything was all mixed together. So if you're dealing with something like that, and I mean literally like newspaper articles, like layers of stuff, newspaper articles would be covered in photos, negatives. It was a lot to go through. But if you don't have that much stuff, you can look at other categories, broad time frames, like decades, not years even. Just to get some kind of grouping, you could use categories like a family group. I've decided for mine, because it's largely the way that my pictures came to me. I have the pictures from my mom. I have pictures that I scanned for one of my cousins that came from his family. So I've split them into the source of the pictures. So, and into my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, and then my husband's family, are the sort of the categories.
So Kathy, once you've kind of got them categorized or boxed or whatever and organized in whatever taxonomy you want, and I think one of the things that you're telling people here is, don't get so worked up about a professional mechanical way of doing it. Do it in a way that makes sense to you and nobody else.
Exactly.
So assuming that, let's just assume for a second, now they've done that. Laura Goldstein asked a question that she beat me to the punch, and that is, what are the kind of the best ways to digitize? Because there's so many different ways to now tackle the problem.
Yes. Well, and that's another point too, in terms of when you're sorting your stuff beforehand, is to separate different types of media. Like if you've got, because we talk a lot about photos, but we're also talking about movie reels, the old VHS recordings, audio tapes, all sorts of stuff that have to be digitized differently. Scanning, what you want to do is, a print is a moment captured in time on a physical piece of paper. By digitizing it, you want to get it in a format so you can tell the stories, add other information. So even a photo of something or another photo can have a story behind it. So for scanning, pros follow very high standards. But I look at it as there's best, I don't know how to start, best, better, best, not as best.
Yeah.
I told you, Cameron, the chemo's brain sometimes, just that lost that little sequence anyway, but you get my point. Pros use top of the line scanning equipment or scan with cameras, but not everybody needs to do that. You can scan with, you'll just have a little bit, you'll have a difference in quality depending how you scan. But for the most part, I've scanned stuff with my phone. when I didn't have access to my scanners. One of my biggest pieces of advice that I've been giving people lately, because I read a lot on different boards and questions on photo organizing, is everyone goes, well, I'm going to digitize my photos. What kind of scanner should I buy? Or should I use this app? Or should I use that app? If you have any budget at all, I would hire someone to do your scanning, because one reason, or the first reason, is because you're going to get top quality. Then you don't have to worry about all this. The second thing is the equipment is not cheap. So you could spend a lot of money, and once you're done, then I've got a room full of scanners now that I'm not going to use. So it adds to my clutter. And the third part is what's with having someone else do it is it's really kind of a tedious thing to do. There are people out there who love doing it, so they do it for a living. I personally don't. And then my only other advice there would be, if you're going to send it out to a service, just make sure you check around with some friends, look at the reviews, and make sure you're sending it to a quality place to have it scanned. And I think, Cameron, if I'm not mistaken, you've got something recommended.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have, we believe that the most important part is to get it digitized however you can, because once it's digitized, then it's manageable. All right. And the way Ponga works is that we protect your original image files, because what we're doing is making essentially a copy of them, creating a working copy that we turn into a URL and allowing you to add additional content to that duplicate copy. So, the quality of the picture is kind of, it's like beauty in the eye of beholder. Some people want to scan right off their phone, and that's perfectly acceptable. It may not be necessarily the highest resolution scan you can get, but I have to tell you, some of the scanning software that I have on my iPhone is pretty darn good. You can go to a professional. I just paid $1,800 to get basically my entire family's archive done by a professional in Colorado. And you can spend more than that, less than that. It depends on whether you want restoration services, et cetera. We recognize that this is complicated, and it's one of the areas that we need to make more simple. I will guarantee every one of you have some kind of a scanning facility, probably within 5 miles of where you live. It's either going to be in a strip mall or a photo company or a library or what have you. If you go to ponga.com, we have a directory of scanning companies on our website. Some of them are located in Washington, D.C., Colorado, Salt Lake City. We also have the ability to refer you to all of the family history centers that are owned and run by the Mormon Church. They will allow you to use all of their scanning facilities for free. So all you need to do, there's thousands of these things across the United States. We've located every one of them. Go to our site, put in your zip code. It'll get you to the closest one. I'm pretty sure it's going to be between 5 and 10 miles away, and you can all do it yourself for free. And they have very good coaches there that do this for a living.
That can help you with that. So
yeah.
So those are a couple of things about the scanning. Just a couple more tips on the organizing. You don't need to do a ton of it beforehand. You just need to get something so that you have smaller bits to work on. So whatever fits you to break the smaller bits down. You don't need, as a professional, we organize absolutely everything's chronologically ordered. We're identifying who's in every picture. But for you, I suggest, if you're going to use Ponga, and it has facial recognition, and so you don't need to do a bunch of organizing ahead of time. And I'm coming around. I have the brain that really likes chronological order, but I'm coming to see that as I start working on my own photos, where I know the people, I know the stories, organizing by people is really kind of a really cool way to do it, because it's like, oh, I want to tell somebody a story about grandpa, and then I can just search his name, and I don't have to try and figure out, okay, well, there's stories about grandpa over the 90 years he lived. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I can just go and find grandpa and look for the stories. So I think that's really cool. I think Barb was going to throw up a picture for me of one of my pictures in Ponga that I'll then can make a couple more points about. I like to take you by surprise there, Barbara. So this is this image here. You've probably seen it in some of the advertising. This is my grandparents and my aunt and uncle who immigrated from England to Canada in 1929. And as you can see, that picture, we have some family stuff scanned. That one had been scanned. And I tossed up the scan because Cameron had asked me, he said, well, what kind of things do you wish you'd done differently? And originally I thought, oh, I shouldn't have put pictures in that weren't edited, but it's another time consumer. I had so much fun telling the stories and looking at things in that picture in Ponga. And I can put all that information that I need, because after the next step a photo organizer goes through is to add what they call metadata, which is the information about the photo. But it's way more fun to do it. And professionals use Lightroom, they use Photo Mechanic. There's all kinds of, or Adobe Bridge, all sorts of ways to add this information, but they're like technical software. Ponga's fun, and that's what keeps me going, working on my own photos, is to have fun doing it. I think, 1 second, I have to make my screen a little bit bigger. I'm blind. I think Barbara was showing some of the notes that I've already put in there. And
Yes.
And this also leads us back to the point, the little girl there is my Aunt Hazel. And it leads us back to the point that one of the things I tagged, Hazel wrote a whole ton of family history for us, which is wonderful, which I'm just copying into here as much as I can. But she made in her notes was that they were taken by car, because I looked at this picture and we originally thought, well, they came here on a wagon, but my grandfather was a coal miner. So the chances that he knew how to drive a wagon with horses when he got to Canada were not really that sure. So, but if you look carefully behind the wagon wheel, there's old-fashioned car wheel. So that's where you can, so obviously that confirmed my aunt's story that they were driven there in a car. And so I think this was probably the guy from the Hudson's Bay Company. They were called Hudson Bay settlers. He's probably the one that posed them there and took the picture. So, although we do have a lot of family debate over whether this is in fact my grandfather or not. In the family, we're never sure.
So Kathy, that's an interesting, sorry to cut you off there for a second.
No problem.
But Kathy Miller asked a question that speaks exactly to this situation, which is, you know, she's got a ton of photos that don't have any markings on them, like when it was taken, who's in it, you know, and she wants to know, should I digitize them and then research them? Should I research them now and then digitize them? And I think my personal opinion is get them digitized, because then you can distribute them to other members of your family or people that are in the world that knows how to date these photos. And you can crowdsource from family and friends, maybe who these people are once you get them digitized, and then can send them around. But Kathy, what's your thinking about the way for her to do that when you don't?
I would absolutely digitize them first, because this print is probably only 3 by 5, if that. And as you can tell, we've blown it up pretty large here. I work on like a big screen. I work on my desktop computer when I'm doing work. And so we can get a really good look at them. The photo it's blurry. I've tried enhancing it. I could send it out and be restored, but there's stories behind all those, like all the creases and everything can tell the stories too. So I would digitize first, because then you can examine more closely. Like, I never actually saw the wagon wheels until someone I shared this photo with said, that looks like a car wheel in the background. And I went, oh my gosh, it sure does. Somebody asked quickly, they settled in near Vermilion, Alberta, on a farm it's actually closest to a place called Eiley, Alberta. And for anybody who's probably not an Albertan or even an Albertan, neither Vermilion nor Eiley are probably going, wow, that's a famous place, but they did have a farm there. So that's the area they were in Alberta, northern Alberta, east of Edmonton is where they settled. So,
you know, I have one other little piece of advice for that big album that you have that you don't know who anybody is. And we're saying, go ahead and scan it, get it digitized, and crowdsource the feedback. If you have any kind of context about provenance, how you got hold of this album, what else you do know about it, pieces of paper that came with it, all of those little bits are clues that will help you later in figuring it out. And we in Ponga put it in things like the description and the title up here. There's all sorts of wonderful ways to bring that context in and treat it as another clue and part of the provenance of the album, print, envelope, whatever you have.
Yeah, I think that's a critical item, Barb. And as I just put in the chat, I think figuring out what the nuances are within an image can help you articulate the story by figuring out kind of what time period, the fact that there's an automobile here and it looks like a certain type of wheel could obviously help you narrow down maybe at least the decade. One of the things as you were talking, Kathy, that occurred to me is, now I've got all my family's photos all digitized and ready to go. And then an example came up just this past New Year's where my son and I were in Colorado, and he's a member of the digital generation. And so he probably whipped off 500 photos that he took with his iPhone in a matter of days, maybe 5 of 10 of which were worth calling out for any kind of curation and storytelling. How do you decide where to get started? We can't have that intimate relationship with 5,000 photos. So how do we discover which is the ones we want to start really articulating a story and using as our foundation for that process?
Just one sec. The chats are distracting me.
Sorry.
I think one of the best ways to get started is to not look at, again, as I mentioned, is look at little bits. And I think it evolves over time. Like if we're looking back, imagine Cameron in your ancestors' photos, like we're talking for the farm pictures, I've probably got less than 100 pictures. So it's not that hard to decide which are most important, and like is more to the effect of if they're not totally destroyed or if they're not completely blurry so you can't even tell who they are, they're important photos to talk about.
Yeah.
But as I move on, and I was mentioning going through more the photos of my kids who are 25 now, and I'm up to about when they were 4 or 5. And I just went through those big envelopes you get from, even in the print situation, when you got your kids' Christmas pictures taken at Walmart or Sears or somewhere, and you've ordered like 58 copies of everything. Throw it out, like get one, keep one, throw it all away, pick the best photo like of an event, pick out what best represents the event. And I give you permission to delete some of those photos that aren't there. Sometimes that's all we need is permission.
Right. If I can add another insight here, and this comes back to a question that's appearing a couple of different places here. Jamie is asking about facial recognition and how does that work with the natural aging? You just gave a very good hint there as you described your incremental process of bringing in envelopes of photos from that photo session. When you bring batches of photos in that are at a contiguous period of time, there's an article about the wedding reception shortcut, or in your example, all the kids' school pictures. When you've got the context for where these pictures all happened, you upload them into Ponga. And then when the Ponga gallery goes through them, it's very easy to put names to faces. Add more pictures of those kids at that same period. Very, very easy. Ponga spots them. You don't even have to worry about putting names to faces because Ponga says, yeah, I've seen this one before. In the wedding album shortcut, we call that the very smart in-law. You've just introduced them to every family member and they never forget a face. So they've got everybody in the group all at once. And that's how we handle kind of the natural aging process. Bring pictures in rough aging order. And Ponga's pretty good at remembering that, I've seen them before. I've seen them before. I've seen them before. Because it's only a slight change.
It's actually pretty good too at, I think I mentioned before, I have twin aunts and I put a picture of them in, and sometimes I can tell them apart. One of their daughters can tell them apart better than I can. When they were kids, I can barely even tell them apart. But Ponga is doing a pretty good job of picking them out.
We typically
make a mistake here and there, but and it picks out people as they age. Like this picture we said was my grandfather, and a couple other ones from around then. It's picking him up like 5-10 years later now and identifying it as him. So
we generally can keep those. We can generally keep those photos from late single digit ages, 7, 8, 9, maybe all the way up to maybe 80-ish, 85, maybe a little longer. Most people's facial geometry doesn't change that much because you have to remember we think about people aging and getting wrinkly and going from baby faced, et cetera. But the algorithms that drive that facial recognition are actually looking at the geometry. They're looking at the spacing between ears. They're looking at the size of the nostril. They're looking at the distance between the eyes. That stuff doesn't change typically. And so we can, once you identify somebody, we can track them pretty much through their life cycle.
Right. So the blurry small pictures are harder, but if you have a few good pictures of them up close that are sharp, we don't care what glasses, we don't care about beards and things like that, because we're not even looking at that. We're looking at the geometry of what makes a face. So that's a really good one. If I may interrupt also, when we come back to this, there's a couple of important questions that are way beyond my chat ability to respond, Kathy, about things like how to clean negatives. Thank you, Marcy, for that one. And Dallas asks about what to do once I've digitized the originals. What do you do with the original prints? And you can still come back to that.
Okay, do you want to come back to them?
It's up to you as to how complicated the answer is.
It'll both be a bit of a while. So why don't we come back to them?
No problem.
If you can bring them back, Barb, they're both really good questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we can real quickly though, we can answer one of them very fast, which is Dallas's question about, we maintain a repository of those originals in our database. They're there for the life of your subscription. You can, we don't charge for repositorying your photos. We're not a photo storage company. So you can put one photo in there, or you can put 10,000 photos in there, 50,000 photos. We don't charge you for the number of photos, and they'll be there as long as you have a subscription. If you ever want them back, you can ask for them back. And we even keep them after a subscription might have expired, just in case you want to come back and use them later.
I think actually that's all true. And I think,
and it's a really good
also
point,
asking
Cameron,
about
with a lot that's happening these days with online photo sites.
Yeah.
Makes me happy. Yeah, I think what Barb's about to say is that I think the question pertained to what do you do with the stuff, the physical stuff, once you've digitized it.
Yeah.
And I have a couple little tips for that.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second.
Give me 1 second, so I don't mess it up. What you need to think about, and it's part of your organizing, and what you decide to digitize, is, first of all, what do people need to see? What do you want the future generations to see? What do they need to physically have? And what do you want them to know about in terms of, and that can be your home movies. It can be, we were chatting a bit before about, we're talking also about physical objects that you can photograph too, that are important things in the family. In terms of what to keep in the long run, or what to do with everything, it depends on your comfort level. I've been digitizing a bunch of negatives. I'm going to keep my negatives and get rid of the prints, because the negative is the so-called original image and it takes up less space. And now they're digitized. And this is an important point too that we don't want to let go. They are backed up in several places. Don't ever keep your photos in just one place. That's the next big tip. Backed up online, they're backed up on hard drives. They're well backed up. So now that I'm comfortable that I'm not going to lose them, I'm going to get rid of all the prints because they take up a lot of room. And in terms of, some physical things, there's things, I've got cool stuff that I don't know, it's cool to me, maybe nobody else can be cool to them, but I've got things like, I got the very first tax return my mother ever filed. So I'm going to scan it and I'm going to put it in Ponga where my mom's stuff is. And then I'm going to throw the original. Well, I'll probably shred it, but I'm going to get rid of the original because my kids aren't going to have room to keep all that stuff. So it's sort of a matter of what's important to you and your family. And part of it is indeed very much a letting go process too. And that's sometimes very hard. I'm finding that with physical stuff, because I'm trying to get on board with the decluttering, but I also am terrified that we're going to become the generation who threw everything away and nobody knows what life was like anymore. So I'm trying to do things like take pictures of stuff. And I think, Barb, we have a picture for an example of a picture of a ship in a bottle, which you'll have to book a one-on-one with me if you want to hear the full story, because it would take me a while to tell, but I'm just going to find my ship in a bottle. We're going to do this live. She's going to drop a picture right into my, Barb's in my Ponga account running it so that I don't have to.
Actually, I'm in my own Ponga account
Oh,
because you have
okay.
your own Ponga subscription. You have shared an album with me. You sent
Right.
the picture to me a moment ago. And so I have
Uh-huh.
just dropped it into my own account. Actually, I am Audie, newsflash. So I've done the upload and I do a quick refresh to see what is up there in the cloud and refresh it in my browser window. And looky there, it's a ship
There
in
it
a
is.
bottle.
It's in there already. And
So
so this week, I
cute.
just took a quick snapshot of it. But and in answer to the question of whether it's better to digitize things or not, the ship in the bottle, it's a liniment bottle for anybody who's not as old as me and doesn't recognize it. But if you're old as me, you know that Sloan's liniment came in those bottles. It's a ship built in the bottle. My mom's name is on that ship. And there is a long story behind it about who made but needless to say, my grandfather brought it back from somewhere in the Second World War where he had somebody made it for him. But I'm going to stop because I want to tell the story. But that'll be the teaser to either message me if you want to hear more about that story. But that two things saved. I'm still not sure that might be something that my kids want. But the other thing is now I have a picture of it if it gets lost. Also now, short of sticking Post-it notes to the actual ship in the bottle, now I can tell all the whole story. I can tell where it came from, the whole story. I can link to the place where it was made is online. I can link to that. All things that would be very hard to do with the actual physical ship.
Yeah, that's really great. And you can do the same thing that you demonstrated earlier about picking elements of this and commenting on the story, either verbally or in a textual mode, and adding other relevant media clips. I do want to take this opportunity, since Kathy does have a very colorful and interesting story here, but is not necessarily fit for this type of forum, is I wanted to mention to everybody as a public service announcement that we're going to be having an ongoing series profiling Kathy's journey with her own family photos and stories. So you can hear a little bit about, you know, the ditches she got her ox into and the mistakes she made and the victories she had and the process and everything else. And we'll do it in various and sundry formats over the next 12 months. And if this sounds like something you're interested in, just maybe drop a thumbs up in the chat regarding your interest about this.
And I think a good point to make right here is you saw how quickly Barbara was able to pop that picture. And now I just took it with my phone on my desk. I'm like, is that Barb has a very good saying, and it's perfection is the enemy of
Done.
done. Thank you. I didn't know it was that simple. Perfection is the enemy of done. And I'm a perfectionist, which is why I go, gee, I should have edited that photo and I should have put that into my black shot box. And when I start to actually take down, but I'm going to just put that picture in my account and tell the story. The other thing besides typing the stories in, you can just dictate them right into the Ponga. And so another gift for future generations is descriptions, the stories being told in your voice, in their grandmother's voice, in their great-grandmother's voice. Like, wouldn't you love to have that now with your old photos? So
if I may interject with just a brief, I can, easily demonstrate that now, where I'm simply recording my voice, blah, blah, blah. Stop. There it is. That's my voice. And it's done. Not that my voice is interesting, but what is important is that when Ponga captures recorded sound right here that easily, I'm also creating something that I can save externally. We're not munging the data. The file is actually, the sound file is there. And if you want to then go and use that sound file in something else, you absolutely can.
Yeah. It's important also, I want to go back and make 2 points about that. One is, one of the things that I wrote in a very early blog was the idea of my son being able to have a relationship with his grandfather who died before he really got to know him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, wouldn't it be great for him to click on a picture of my dad's in his army uniform, telling him what it was like to be a paratrooper during the Korean War in his own voice? Yeah. Those are really, really powerful things. So if you can capture the voice of the people whose stories are in the photos, that's unbelievably moving and emotional. The other thing is, if you're curating information digitally by recording your version of a story, again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Get it done. It's digital, for crying out loud. You can change it later.
Mhm.
You know, if you make a mistake, go back and fix it. It's not a big deal.
That's another good point to both the recording and the fix it point, Cameron, is that if your grandfather, a husband, starts telling a story, slip a voice recorder under them. They'll blink at it. They'll know they're on a riff. They'll let you do it. Just capture the moment in whatever tool, phone thing is handy. When you've got that recording, you can bring it into Ponga. You just can't. If it's video, you just put it on a hosted site, put it in Google Drive, copy paste the link. If you've got a voice, exactly the same thing, and 14 other fancy ways to do that. We'll walk you through all of that. Ponga.com Academy.
Yeah.
Lots of
Absolutely.
good training there. Talking about, and I see a question there, somebody says, well, what do we do about naming stuff?
Yes,
And
thank you.
as you could see, and anybody who had a quick look at that example in my account where Barb was looking at the album I shared at her, I had not been very consistent in my names, which, as I said, the good part is I can just go back and name them. So my way, professional photo organizers, we like to name things by date. And partly because as you move things around, you put things here, you put them there, sometimes the information that's attached to them can get removed. Usually what no program changes is the title. So I name mine by date because I mentioned before, I think chronologically. And then you could put, like I could add to this one, arriving on the farm, or farm years, which I'm calling this section. I think I did actually call it arriving on the farm because that's what it was. So the biggest thing is that you be consistent. So this is two I was consistent with, which is good thing you picked examples that were named with the date. And the beauty about if you name them outside of a program that's like that a pro outside of one of the ones the pros would use for speed, is you can name them whatever you want. A lot of programs like Lightroom, you have to have year, month, day. I don't know what day that picture was taken because I don't know how long it took to get from Halifax to Eiley, Alberta. So it's sometime in April. They landed in March, and so it's probably April, but I don't know. And so the biggest importantest thing is to be consistent in how you name things.
Right.
Like don't switch from year, month, day, and then make one that's called April 26th, 1922. Because if you're outside of the, in Ponga, we're going to talk about sorting by faces, but if they're somewhere else, they're going to go out completely out of order, because most computer programs sort things by numeric date.
Yeah.
Things. I have Barb and Cameron here to correct my lack of technical knowledge here, but that's how computers sort stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing I'll add to that, Kathy, is that when you bring a file into Ponga, you saw me just drag and drop that file in. You sent me the file from your camera, from your phone, and it had a long gobbledygook number, a random number. So I changed it in my desktop to ship in a bottle and drag it in here. Ponga takes whatever the name of your file is and keeps that here. As I own this picture, I can change it to anything I want to, and I can put anything I want to in this description. What I often do with my own photos is I use the default settings in the scanner as I'm bringing it in with some kind of a code. Maybe I'm smart enough to know a date, especially after this webinar, I will be. And bring all of the materials in. And if I change the name of the title for some other reason of what I want to present to somebody, I will keep that name, file name, and put it in the description. File originally called blah, because that way I can still cross-reference it to where some other original file might be, or some other reference of information about it.
What sounds interesting to me is, as we're going through this process, Barb and Kathy, that there's a lot of questions that sound very close to Kathy's organizational experience and best practices, as well as the kind of methodologies and ways that Ponga works. And it strikes me that maybe one of the things that I'd like to offer up to the audience today is, if you're interested in seeing a demo, please toss us another thumbs up in the webinar chat. And what we'll do is we will schedule another one of these where we'll have Kathy participate as well. And we'll go through actually a process of going through maybe the life cycle of a photograph inside of Ponga. And that way you can see what it's like to upload the photo and then name it, and then go through the entire kind of curation process all the way to inviting somebody to comment. And I'm seeing a ton of thumbs up here. So we will get an email out over the next week or so, scheduling everybody for a live demo on a webinar. And maybe we'll use one of Kathy's pictures and use one of hers as an overview of an example of some storytelling. So thank you for that support, everybody.
Okay, I want to leave some time for us to answer some of those many questions. So I thought I'll just
Yes.
wrap up by recapping. There's a couple more steps, but we've kind of talked about them anyway, and they're not, my notes were not long on that, but essentially the steps are to gather things, and you can make your plan either before or after. Sometimes it's easier to make a plan when you know what you're dealing with. So either, you know, your plan might include gathering, you might just gather stuff up, make the plan, sort however makes sense, but not to minutia. You don't need to have the minute details sorted. Digitize stuff, and then what pros call adding metadata, that's adding keyword locations, etc. Pros do it to a certain standard. My advice to you is you add the information you want. I'm adding for me is most important is to add the stories and the basic. Whenever I look at a picture, I go, who is that? When was this? And what were they doing? And the what were they doing can just go so far into your history. What Lisa talked about is social history. We all have stories to share, and they're important. And I always looked at my, you know, I came from, my grandparents were farmers. My mom was a bookkeeper. I think I'm not 100% sure. I think I was the first in the whole family to go to university. But we have important stories to tell too, not just to each other. We have important stories that intersect with that social history. So that to me is the biggest part. And don't get bogged down in technicality. Just tell the story. Technology is advancing so far that now you can search fields in any kind of program will pick up info, like Barb said, put a word in and it'll pick it up. You don't necessarily need to be keywording everything, which is tagging or what's important to you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about storage. That's probably a whole session in itself to talk about what to keep and how to store things, because it's important that we have what we do decide to keep, that we store it in such a way that we minimize the amount that it's going to deteriorate and keep it for future generations, perhaps in better ways than the stuff we've inherited in all the boxes and bins and things. And then the final step, which to me is the fun part, which is why I do this the whole way through the process, is to share. And so we deliver that to the client at the end so they can share it with everyone, because that's the good part. With Ponga, you're already there because you can share at any point. Once you get stuff digitized, take a picture of it, you can start sharing it. And I think Cameron mentioned it. I wanted to mention another, that to me, one of the other things that I love about Ponga, and why I've decided to put my pictures that were my important best pictures in it. I'm not going to put every single photo we have, because that would be overwhelming again, but is the ability to crowdsource and to share your files with others and have them contribute. Because I shared those photos I shared with Barbara, she could actually go in now and comment on them. And in fact, on some of mine, a friend of Ponga's, Victoria, she's gone in on some of mine, looked at some of mine and made comments, because she's also another Canadian and has been working on her photos about, is this possibly this, or did you notice this? And she's looking at the details in the photos that may help us come up with the stories and the dates and all that information. So
right, that's an important function. And for everybody who might be a little bit concerned about security, it's important to understand that you own your own library. So when Kathy invited Barb, she designated Barb as a contributor rather than a viewer. And so, and you can designate people and de-designate them as you see fit, so that you can decide who gets to contribute and who does not. So the security of the system is all up to the owner of the library of photos.
And password protected and secure. It's not public. So you're giving permission to Ponga to run artificial intelligence on your, for facial recognition on your photos. but you're not giving it to the whole world like apparently we are with some other companies right now. So
So
it's
I'd like to
private
thank
and
you very
secure,
much.
which is important to me.
I think based on the questions and the interaction that we've seen on this, that I hate to say this, Kathy, but I think you're going to have to come back because we have only clearly scratched the surface here and we're almost out of time. So I want to thank everybody for that. And I'd like to ask Barbara to describe kind of the special offers that you're going to get for attending today's event. And you can count on the fact that we're going to have Kathy back in very short order to participate not only in a demo, but also will make sure that everybody is linked in to her journey as she goes through her photo experience with Ponga. So Barb, can you kind of walk us through some of the offers?
Sure. And thank you again, everyone, for your incredible participation and engagement. I feel badly right away that so many questions we didn't quite catch, but as you can see, we're thrilled by your engagement and look forward to following up with you both in the material that we have online, one-on-one sessions, and a future session like this with the mighty Kathy as our expert advice and insight. And you can always reach out to us and on social media, as well as in our live chat sessions. It's really been a thrill to be here and to hear all of this enthusiasm and questions and engagement. Thank you.
This has been an amazing session today. Thank you for everybody, your attendance and your engagement and involvement today. It's been really high value content for anybody wishing to capture and organize the important moments and stories in their lives. Please check out Kathy's website at calgaryphotosolutions.ca and get maybe a deeper understanding of her background, who she is and what she's doing. And again, thank you for everybody for coming along today. We have more to share with you, so look forward to future communications from us about new content, events, programs, partnerships, and as we just decided, a demo coming up here probably in the next month. And we're looking forward to telling you more about Ponga. We look forward to welcoming you as members. Please check out our website and subscribe today. Every subscriber will get started with a 21-day free trial, and we'll see you on a future event. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.